Welcome to County Board Wrap-Up, where each month we chat with the County Board Chair and a guest about the actions the board took at its public meeting. This month, newly elected Board Chair Jay Fissette joins us, and along with newly elected Vice Chair Katie Crystal. I'm Kara O'Donnell, and in the next half hour, we're going to take a look at some of the important actions the board took at its first meeting of the year, and we'll touch on some priorities that we'll be talking about all year long. Thank you both for joining us today.
Nice to be here.
And now let's start off with some of those priorities. You have a very active agenda for the coming year. Let's talk about some of the highlights.
Sure. Well, January 3rd, we each talked about sort of what are our priorities, what are the focus for the year, and most of these things are not new. They're continuation of things we've been working on. Number one would be the facility siting in Arlington, a big issue in our community, where we're going to meet those needs with that limited land that we have, and we have a joint facility advisory committee that is just geared up and ready to help us make some of those decisions, engage the community. Another one of the issues that is not a new one to us is housing affordability. Mm-hmm. Obviously, victims of our own success here in Arlington, a lot more people want to live here than we have land for, so we will continue to address some of those challenges and develop some new tools this year to help us along. Just this last week, big success, Nestle coming to Arlington. So another one of our challenges is the vacancy rate that, we used to be 7-8%. In recent years, it's kind of 20%, 22%. So we've taken a few good hits on that number, dropping it in recent years. But it remains a challenge for us to continue to ensure that office space that we have is filled. It's not unique to Arlington. Everybody's feeling this with all the other pressures, but we're pretty excited about Nestle USA headquarters coming to Arlington and joining our corporate citizenship. The only other one I'll mention right now is around environmental sustainability, a real personal thing for me over many years. I know the board is committed to the environmental sustainability of our community. It's something we tackle in multiple ways, through transportation, through renewables, through helping our individual homeowners make their homes more green, the Green Home Choice Program. This year, I think we have in the queue a number of advances in our environmental sustainability as well.
Okay. Now, this isn't your first time as chair.
Nope, done it a couple times.
A couple times now, so it's old hat for you. But how have things changed, whether it be your initiatives or kind of the outlook for the county, that kind of thing? How has that changed each time?
Oh, it changes, it evolves, but it also stays the same. I think we're a changing community. Change is challenging for a lot of people, for a lot of communities. It's different, but if you look at Arlington, people that have lived here, come back after serving overseas for some years, 3-4 years later, the complexion, the physical surroundings have changed. We have so much dynamic, an economic prosperity and a base that is really the envy of most. The alternative is a stagnant community with empty shops and kids that won't stay in a community. Here we have just the opposite. We have more people that want to live here than we have space for, growing school enrollment. So we continue to sort of adjust with the community and facing those challenges.
Okay. Okay, now Katie, this is your first time being vice chair.
It is.
What are some of the things you're looking to accomplish? What are your goals for the year?
Absolutely. Well, I think Jay's summary really captures so much of what we all as a board have our eyes on, as well as the chair and vice chair, in terms of our economic competitiveness, environmental sustainability, and facilities planning, which I think will be a major focus for the year ahead, and something that is a priority for me, along with Jay serving as one of the liaisons to the new Joint Facilities Advisory Commission. I think some of our priorities have also been have to be shaped by the national and federal climate that we're in right now. And so looking to protect our most vulnerable residents, those who are concerned about the impacts of recent executive orders or in general other priorities of this administration, that has to be a priority for us. I remain really interested, as Jay mentioned, all of us do, with the affordability picture. And for me, that takes the form not only of housing affordability, but childcare affordability, which is a tremendous challenge for many of our young families. So looking at ways through land use, through closer examination of our regulatory issues around childcare, and other strategies that we can push forward on to incentivize and make it easier to create childcare centers and increase the supply of high quality but affordable childcare in our community.
Okay, now you just touched on this a moment ago, but one priority for the entire board has been making that effort to ensure that Arlington remains a safe, a welcoming community for everyone. Now, and you even issued a letter to the community about that. Let's talk a little bit about that. What kind of feedback have you gotten?
There is no question that this new administration, people are still in shock, they're still in denial, they're still concerned, and the watchword, I think, is uncertainty. Everywhere, whether it's in the private sector, the public sector, there's a great amount of uncertainty and unpredictability about what will happen. Mixed messages, but the first series of executive orders have not necessarily been helpful. And we know, we hear it out in the community. We hear it every day, consistently, the reflection of that uncertainty and fear and angst and anxiety in families, in homes, in the schools, with their kids. And, that's why I was so proud to, on behalf of this board, which is unified on this issue, to reassert and, reassure that we have been, will be a welcoming and inclusive place. We will not step beyond what's required of us by law in terms of enforcing immigration laws. That's not the role of the local government. It's the role of the federal law enforcement. And we will continue to come up with new ways of outreaching, explaining what our policies are, trying to give people as much comfort and awareness as we can. It is tops on our priority. And Katie's been, really bird dogging this one.
Yeah. And I appreciate, Kara, that you asked what kind of feedback we've gotten, because I think it's important when we talk about a welcoming community that we're not talking just about what are the policies of your government and your board. This is about how community members treat one another and the expectations that we all have for our community. One of the things that has been tremendously heartening and makes me very proud to lead Arlington is how much mail communication, feedback in the community we've gotten, not just from folks worried about their own circumstances, but from members of our community who want to know what they can do to help and want to hold their local government accountable for protecting their friends and neighbors and families who are so important to them. And so it is, we've heard, from a number of people. Of course, no one is ever entirely unified in a community. There are divergences of opinions and different approaches even within Arlington towards recent executive actions. But we are hearing loud and clear that this is a welcoming community in all its forms, not just in terms of government policy.
Now, one term that kind of gets kicked around a lot is that term sanctuary city, or in Arlington case, sanctuary county. Is Arlington a sanctuary county?
Yeah, the term sanctuary is not defined anywhere. It is a term without a clear definition. Hence, from the beginning, we've not used that term to define ourselves. We define ourselves and explain that we're welcoming and inclusive. I don't know if it's a difference without a distinction, but the truth is we have taken every step that, and we will continue to, that we can to ensure that we're welcoming and inclusive. I mean, let's look at what Arlington is. It's safe. People treat each other with respect. We have an incredible community that we've created built on that respectfulness. And we do not want to break that down or let anyone else break it down. So we're going to do everything we can to reaffirm it.
At every level, from government to law enforcement to schools to neighbors helping neighbors.
Absolutely, in all its forms.
All right. Well, thank you both very much. We're going to take a short break now, and when we come back, we'll talk about a newly appointed commission that got to work this month. Stay with us.
A digital revolution is taking place. Sweeping changes being brought about by computing power and mobile technology are here. How do you see life being different in 10, 20, 30 years from now? How will the digital economy change Arlington? Arlington County is hosting a series of public discussions about these very issues. Join us on February the 15th at the Central Library Auditorium from 7 to 8:30 p.m. and be part of the future to seek and discover the unharnessed power of technology and define Arlington's digital destiny.
Remember that Arlington has a snow ordinance. All property owners are required to clear snow and ice from public sidewalks adjacent to their property within 24 hours after snow stops falling, or within 36 hours if accumulations are more than 6 inches. Also, help your neighbors clear the sidewalks and clear snow from the storm drains, downspouts, and most importantly, fire hydrants. We also have 25 snow blowers available to lend to civic associations and community groups. When you're shoveling this year, a quick tip is to wait until our plows make their first pass along your street to shovel in front of your driveway. This will minimize on pushback from the plows.
Welcome back to County Board Wrap-Up, our monthly chat with county board members about the important action the board takes and how they affect us in our community. We're talking today with our new County Board Chair, Jay Fezette, and Vice Chair, Katie Crystal. Thank you both once again for being here. Now, we talked about this a little bit in the earlier segment, but the new Joint Facilities Advisory Commission, this is going to be a big priority for both of you, Katie, you especially. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So the JFAC is off and running, which we are thrilled about. We spent, I would say, the better part of last year shaping not only a thoughtful and manageable scope for this group of citizens, but really taking our time to make sure that we appointed a group that was fully representative of Arlington in all of its forms and to find individuals that would bring an at-large perspective. We talked at our first meeting that, the constituency we were asking each of them to represent was the future of Arlington County. We really want them to apply a forward-looking point of view, bring some wisdom to bear about how we shape a facilities future for this growing community that will make sense for the next 10, 20, 30 years or more.
And you said the group first got together for its first meeting. What was the energy like? What are some of the priorities this group has to get moving? Absolutely.
So the energy in the room was terrific. It was one of the most positive launches I think I've seen to a community process here in Arlington. And a lot of credit goes to their staff liaison, Jennifer Fioretti, and to a really talented leadership team, Chair Ginger Brown and Vice Chair Greg Greeley, who put a lot of effort to make sure this group was well supported in its beginning start. They will be tackling the interesting challenge of both looking at long-term issues in their first year, as well as helping give us some advice on some really important, more immediate land acquisition and siting and use decisions. So they will be focused in particular on the property for potential acquisition, the Buck property across from Washington Lee High School, an opportunity for a possible land swap in Shirlington related to that property, and a set of possible swaps or trades with Virginia Hospital Center.
And right. You said that this group is not wasting any time. They are getting out and rolling. You mentioned they'll be going out on a bus tour.
Absolutely. So one of their first actions will be a bus tour of some of the sites that I just mentioned, as well as a few others around the county. I think we see all the time, and our citizen leaders know that there is nothing like seeing something for yourself to get a sense of the terrain of a given site, for example, or how something might be set up. So as they make use determinations, we really want them to have in mind the picture of what these sites really look like and can potentially accommodate what the opportunities for multi-use, for example, might be.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to emphasize that the backdrop to this is a growing community with new people living here, adults, new kids in the schools, and that means growing needs, whether it's for bus storage or schools, community facilities, and limited land. So it's really a tough challenge. We're going to be able to add some land to the inventory. We'll have to go over, we'll have to go under. Just what the community facilities study said, we need new creative ways of meeting these needs and mixing and matching the available limited land with that group. And this is completely collaborative with the schools. That's the other piece. Greg Greeley, Ginger Brown, wonderful representatives of the whole community, and the schools have been great partners in this.
How about from more of a long-term perspective? Getting the schools involved with the community, this is really a unique process. And what are some of those long-term issues that a committee's going to be looking at?
Well, I think student population growth and the demographic projections, we just had a fascinating work session between the county board and the school board on some follow-up analysis about our demographic projections. What are the factors that go into that? What do we know about the changes, for example, in single-family housing, which still generates the overwhelming majority of our students? And how are we predicting and evolving our models to make sure that we don't miss student population booms? So those demographic conversations will be under the purview of JFAC. We're also going to ask for their insights when it comes to our capital improvement planning, both on the school and county side. The schools also have what they call their AFSAP, their long-range facilities plan, and we're working on developing something similar on the county side. It's a big lift, right? We don't do just school buildings. Right. We do everything from salt domes to community centers to police impound lots. So trying to get our arms around that kind of long-range planning, a little bit of a lift, a little bit longer term, but the JFAC group is going to have a lot of influence, discussion, and there'll be a key area for us to get feedback as board members and as staff.
Another issue that we've been getting a lot of feedback on, and that we've been seem to be talking about a lot in the last few months, is that issue of the sharing economy and short-term residential rentals. I know this came up a lot here at the beginning of the year of putting some regulations in place before the inauguration. What have you been hearing from folks, on both sides of the issue, and where do we stand now?
Yeah. I think we're in good shape, really. It's really a tribute to the staff and the community that in a relatively short period of time, we tackled this issue, and only a few places in the Commonwealth have done that. Part of the reason we wanted to do it quickly was that the General Assembly had passed some laws last year. They put them on hold. They're trying to tackle it again this year, and we felt that as one of the jurisdictions that has more of these units, 1,500 in 1 month last summer alone, that we needed to provide a legal way for those units to exist and to help inform what the legislature's doing. And I think we've succeeded in doing it. After successfully adopting an ordinance in December, the community feedback we got, which was really terrific. I mean, the quality and the level of feedback was really high. And we heard it, we listened, and we had to advertise a couple of other adjustments to come back and make some amendments in January, just at our last meeting. The big one there, for example, was we added to the eligible folks that can have a short-term stay in their unit, in their home. It has to be their primary residence, are renters. So not only can homeowners do this, but someone who rents an apartment can do this. Now, they have to have the approval and permission from the property manager or the owner of the unit, because that person can further prohibit or just limit the opportunity or the option. But if they allow it, they meet our regs, and then they can do it as well. So that was a big change, and I think brings a whole lot more people into the fold that can take advantage of this opportunity.
Yeah. And you mentioned that now down the line, there's going to be some additional changes, so we want people to really register now.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if we had 1,500 in 1 month in July so far, and the goal is expediting this, making it easy to go online and register your unit. Less than 100 have done so far. If you do it soon, we encourage you to do it, because at some point there will be enforcement. Complaint-driven, but there will have to be enforcement. And there'll probably be a registration fee applied once we get to July. So you got 6 months or 5 months left to get in and not have a fee, because come July there'll likely be a fee to register. So we encourage everyone to go online and do this. It's not hard. We tried to make it easy, and we are really trying to be a good partner with the sharing economy here.
Okay. Okay. I know another issue that we've talked about several times, and I know is a big priority for you, is affordable housing. And we've got some movement in the Westover area. So tell me a little bit about that.
You want to take this one?
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely. So we are trying to respond quickly to what we're seeing is a loss of market rate affordable garden apartments in Westover. We're losing them to redevelopment. And Westover is a wonderful mixed income community. And we hear often from the Civic Association there, as well as from some of the more traditional players in the affordable housing space, that they really want to keep this element of affordable Westover. So our staff has been working to try to address some of these issues as expeditiously as possible. And we were really fortunate to have a partner in the Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing, or APA, which responded to what they knew was a board priority by seeking and seizing this opportunity to acquire a number of properties which they will now renovate and commit as committed affordable units, so that they will retain that status for many, many years to come. So just this past month, we took an action to do a loan from our Affordable Housing Investment Fund to help pay for the acquisition and renovation of those properties. So we are really excited to see where this goes. APA is pursuing an aggressive timetable for renovation so that these really can stay committed and be high quality as well as affordable homes.
Great. Well,
We've
we're going
got to do what we can to both preserve and create new. And the Affordable Housing Master Plan speaks to all these tools and all these goals. In Westover, it's about preserving some fabulous garden apartments and mid-rise buildings.
Right, that eclectic character of Westover.
All the above, historic, affordable, character of the neighborhood, all good outcomes.
All right, we're going to take another short break, and when we come back, we'll talk about an Arlington program that is working to reduce the incidences of domestic violence, as well as developments with the county's towing ordinance. We'll be right back.
We have 4 phases when clearing snow. In Phase 1, we are on alert and pre-treat the roads as the storm approaches. In Phase 2, we clear primary and secondary roads to make sure emergency services can still operate. If we get 6 inches or more of snowfall, plows may make their way into neighborhoods. In Phase 3, we are focused on residential streets. And Phase 4 is when we clean everything up.
Welcome back to the final segment of this month's County Board Wrap-Up. And now we've got a very special topic to cover. Project Peace is a coordinated community-wide initiative dedicated to advancing the most effective and efficient array of education, prevention, protection, and support services to end domestic and sexual violence in our community. And Board Vice Chair Katie Crystal is very involved in this program, and at last month's board meeting, we reported on some of the achievements of Project Peace so far. Tell me a little bit about this program and what it's really all about.
Absolutely. So Project Peace is what's called a coordinated community response. It is a team that brings together many different agencies, many different forms of government, from the magistrate's office to the Commonwealth's attorney's team to our Department of Human Services, as well as a number of nonprofit or community-based providers. Doorways is a familiar face. SCAN, for example, which does advocacy around child violence or violence against children. It is a terrific team. Project Peace just turned 10 last year. It was founded by Barbara Favola, formerly of the County Board, now in the State Senate, and really has taken off its work in the last year or two under the leadership of Cheryl Bozarth, who is the new Project Peace coordinator who joined us in 2016. One of the things we were highlighting last month is really an exciting achievement for this coordinated community response, which is a protocol, which is a sort of bureaucratic term, but what basically it means is that we are running with a new law that took effect last summer, a law actually brought about by the hard work of Senator Barbara Favola, that takes weapons and specifically guns away from those with a permanent protective order against them. Folks find it a little hard to believe that you could have a permanent protective order against you because of a situation of domestic violence, but still have unfettered access to firearms. Because of this law and now this hard work across many different agencies and many different different teams. That will no longer be the case. When there is a situation of domestic violence and a permanent protective order, firearms will be taken away from those individuals, and we know that this will save lives. So we are incredibly excited about this work and excited about making sure that those in the community know that this is something, a protection that they are entitled to when they receive a permanent protective order.
How about some of the other resources available and the programs through Project Peace?
Absolutely. So we're working on a lot of different fronts with Project Peace. As you mentioned, education is a big piece. We have a dynamic work group under the leadership of one of our staff members who works on the Partnership for Children, Youth, and Families, and former school board member, Abby Raphael. And they are working on education in our high schools, because we know that's where the education about consent and understanding intimate partner violence has to start. So they've received a number of grants in recent years to reach out to more students, to have a bigger student presence. And there was a healthy behaviors survey done a couple years ago of Arlington Public School students that demonstrated there is now greater awareness of healthy dating behaviors, which is exactly what we're trying to do, is not only the community response to domestic violence and sexual assault, but the prevention and education piece.
So this will be something that's an ongoing effort and that we hopefully can expand on over time as well.
Absolutely.
All right, wonderful. And then we do have one final topic to touch on today, and this is always one that's a big hot button issue for Arlingtonians, and that is the towing ordinance.
Oh, from domestic violence to predatory towing. Excellent transition.
But what can you tell us about the towing ordinance as it stands right now and how it's going to impact Arlington?
Sure. I'll start out. Katie can finish this off. The board voted 5-0 in December to amend our towing ordinance to provide some enhanced protections for consumers. You know, we've just seen, and a lot of urban places have seen, some real ratchet up in what's called predatory towing. It's really aggressive tows that take place in the first minute or two or three that somebody parks, and then they step across an imaginary line on the sidewalk. And nobody is really benefited when that car is towed and your day is put in turmoil and you have to pay a huge amount of money to get your property back. So it really seems to many of us that that penalty exceeds the crime, especially when the only beneficiary is really the tow company in this instance, not the property owner. So while towing is important in an urban place and you have to be able to move a car that's put in the wrong place, taking up space, we know that these aggressive tows go well beyond that line. And we've tried to put in place some protections that are authorized explicitly in the state code to allow for an authorization, require it at the time of the tow in certain instances for commercial properties during their business hours. This is a program or an implemented policy in Virginia Beach and Stafford County. And all of a sudden in the legislature there is an effort to strip Arlington and Northern Virginia of this option while leaving it in place in places like Virginia Beach, where it's been successful for years. So our legislators are working hard to defeat the legislation and allow some balance to still exist between the property owners and their rights, absolutely, and protecting consumers from these over-aggressive situations.
Now, there was discussion at one point about that whole second signature aspect for a tow. Is that still something that's on the table or no?
So that was the consumer protection to which Jay was just referring. We've called it real-time authorization because it doesn't literally have to be a signature. We're simply asking that whomever the property owner or business tenant might be says and affirms, you're right, this car is illegally parked, it's blocking my paying customers, and we'd like you to remove it. So there's a little bit of affirmative additional step to kind of get at some of that really aggressive towing that Jay mentioned that isn't serving a lot of interest. So we did, as Jay mentioned, vote 5-0 to implement such a provision, again, currently allowed in the Code of Virginia. And we really took a lot of care to shape it as narrowly as possible so that it wouldn't inconvenience the business owners. We also delayed and deferred implementation of it to take another few months. We thought, we have a lot of smart partners at the Chamber of Commerce, for example, and others. If we can work out another solution that gets at this, what's really a real problem for consumers, while still respecting and perhaps better respecting the interests of property owners or business tenants, we are all ears. So it's about creating and shaping a kind of narrowly applied policy that will address this problem without an overreach. We think the bill right now that's before the House in Richmond is exactly the opposite. It's not narrowly shaped. In fact, it's a great overreach. Not only would it strip us of our ability to implement real-time authorization, it would raise tow fees for the second year in a row, up to as much as $250 on Saturday evenings and Friday evenings, which we know is really burdensome.
They took that was the original bill, but they took the fee increase out.
Ah, okay.
They did, trying to move it along, but they've taken the fee increase out. I think people expect they'll be back next year to try to raise the fees again.
So we need people to raise their voices, to talk to their state legislators, thank our Arlington delegation for standing against this bill, and encourage their friends in other affected jurisdictions, Fairfax, for example, or Alexandria, to make sure their state legislators know that this is not a bill that they want and that these consumer protections are important to them.
Okay, well, obviously, issues we are going to continue to discuss throughout the year here on County Board Wrap, from the towing to short-term residential rentals to the JFAC and the work that they are doing. A lot of important issues coming up for 2017. And that brings us to the end of another County Board Wrap-Up. Thank you, Jay and Katie, for joining us today. And join us next time when we'll be taking a close look at the county manager's proposed budget for fiscal year 2018. Until then, thank you for joining us for another discussion of the actions the board takes that affect you and your community. To find out about all of these issues and more, visit our website at arlingtonva.us.
The Arlington County Police Department kicked off the new year with an opportunity for police and residents to get to know each other a bit better. We'll show you how they're forging new connections later in our program, but first, come to the Lubber Run Community Center Design Kickoff Meeting to give us your ideas on a new center from the very beginning of the planning process. It's on Wednesday, February 8th from 6:30 to 9 p.m. at Barrett Elementary School. Learn more and sign up for project updates at projects.arlingtonva.us. There's a community meeting on March 1st about the bike, roadway, and pedestrian project on Washington Boulevard, from Westover to East Falls Church. We want to hear your thoughts on improving bike access and pedestrian safety along that busy stretch of road and explore options for limiting potential impacts in the area. Learn more at projects.arlingtonva.us. Residents in the 3 police districts got to enjoy coffee and meet their district team and neighbors as part of the popular Coffee with a Cop program. Let's take a look.
So this is a program called Coffee with a Cop. The whole idea behind this program is to find another way to communicate with our community that we serve. We go in a meeting. Usually we have agendas and points to make. Coffee with the Cop program is really, we have no agenda, we have no message. It's really based on people coming, citizens that we serve coming and talking to us about the issues that concerns them. We as a department have been doing it for about 2+ years. We do that every few months, maybe about 4 or 5 months. We have a conversation with a cop. Next week we're doing a pizza with an SRO. But the idea behind it is that we're going in with no particular message to deliver other than to listen to the people that we serve. The department truly believes that we're not really here to police anybody, we're here to serve people. Not everybody communicates the same way, so we have to find alternate ways to communicate. So this is one way of it. We can do it by emails. We are on nextdoor.com. We'll do it that way. Press releases. People should know. We are here to serve them. They should know what their police department does and doesn't do. Philosophically, we haven't changed in that sense, but we have recognized we have to do a better job of finding more than one way of communicating. I think we're very cognizant of the fact that there have definitely been areas in the country where communication issues, trust issues have been a factor. So we recognize that it's just not about having one event one day. It's about repeating this thing in different manner, different ways. I think it's just not coffee with the cop. It's if somebody calls us for a meeting, we're going to be there.
Find out when the next coffee is scheduled at police.arlingtonva.us or reach out to your district team on that website. Arlington County property values are up 2.9% over last year, putting the value of the average Arlington home a bit above $617,000. Commercial property values were up 3.4%. The increases indicate that Arlington is a great place to live and do business. You can look up your own property assessment on our website. The 2017 County Board meeting schedule is posted on our website. The January 28th meeting addresses accessory homestays, the impact of widening I-66 on the environment, and more. You can view the agenda and read the staff reports at countyboard.arlingtonva.us by choosing the drop-down Meetings and Agendas tab. Agendas will be posted in advance of each monthly meeting and all work sessions. There was a great turnout for Arlington's 47th annual Martin Luther King Jr. celebration. In February, we'll have a number of programs commemorating Black History Month, including movies, author talks, and a community conversation. Check the Arlington Today calendar on our homepage throughout the month for more event information. Well, that's it for this edition. Remember to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we'll see you next time around Arlington.
A digital revolution is taking place. Sweeping changes being brought about by computing power and mobile technology are here. How do you see life being different in 10, 20, 30 years from now? How will the digital economy change Arlington? Arlington County is hosting a series of public discussions about these very issues. Join us on February the 15th at the Central Library Auditorium from 7 to 8:30 p.m. and be part of the future to seek and discover the unharnessed power of technology and define Arlington's digital destiny.
As a county, we face growth in the services we are asked to provide to our residents. The County Board adopted a 10-year Capital Improvement Plan, or CIP, this summer that envisions a county in the year 2026 that provides more transit service to our neighborhoods, more seats for our school students, more field space for recreation, and continued growth and investment in myriad other forms of infrastructure. Only 12% of the 2.2 square miles of land that the county and schools own is designated for support services. This is not enough space. Therefore, we as a community need to make smart and tough decisions about addressing these needs, not just immediately, but for the future. Every day, the county, through its workforce, and with the great support of the County Board and the residents of this community, we provide rides on our ART bus fleet totaling more than $3.1 million annually. And under our CIP, we anticipate growing our bus fleet from 65 buses currently to 90 buses by the year 2020. We also maintain 975 lane miles of road and fill 12,000 potholes annually. We also maintain 525 miles of water mains, which in the past year included fixing 271 water main breaks. As noted in the report the County Board and School Board received from the Community Facilities Study Group a year ago, with all of these services comes the needs and the wants of this community and finding ways to support them. A real challenge with limited space. To the credit of the County Board, we now have an agreement in place that will allow us to acquire 6.1 acres of property in the center of the county at a place commonly referred to as the Buck site off of North Quincy Street. On November 28, 2016, the county received a proposal from Arcland Property Company offering an exchange of vacant land it owns on Shirlington Road, 3.5 acres, for 2.3 acres of the Buck property. This is an attractive proposal because it would result in a net gain of 1.2 acres of industrial zone property for government functions. However, no decisions have been made on the potential exchange. We wanted to be transparent and release the proposal as soon as possible. We will keep engaging our community as we continue to explore this land option, and I will ask the County Board on December 13th to direct me to move ahead with negotiations on this proposal. Also, in the coming weeks, the county and school boards will be appointing members of the Joint Facilities Advisory Commission that they have established. This commission will be seeking public input on facilities issues in the upcoming months, and I hope to brief the commission and seek their input on this proposal. For ongoing updates on the possible North Quincy Street Shirlington Road land exchange, visit the county website and search Buck Property Exchange. You can also sign up for email updates. Thank you.
This year, we are getting more plows into neighborhoods sooner. When we get 6 inches or more of snowfall, we will send plows into neighborhoods as we are still clearing primary and secondary roads. When and where the additional plows go is on a case-by-case basis, but we have 46 trucks and 92 drivers at the ready and more when the big one hits.
Do you know where you can plan your family's next picnic and nature walk? Travel back in time without leaving your chair? Or maybe take a tour of Arlington County's public art, even when it's raining? Well, here at Arlington County's GIS Mapping Center, we can help you do all of this and more from your desktop computer or mobile device. GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems, and we gather and analyze data to create maps, charts, and 3D models of the world around you. Whether it's planning a safe route to school for your child, or planning a bike route on over 100 miles of trails, we've got you covered. And if you need a bike, we can show you where all the Capital Bike Share stations are, repair stations, and restrooms for your next adventure on wheels. Finding the nearest police station, fire hydrant, bus stop, or voting station couldn't be easier thanks to Arlington County's GIS Mapping Center. Our team supports Arlington's residents, county government, and other organizations. We provide aerial photo analysis, data maintenance, digitizing support, and much more. Providing these tools empowers you to make better informed decisions about your work, life, and recreation in the county. See what GIS is doing for Arlington and see what it can do for you. Visit maps.arlingtonva.us and get started.
Introducing a new day of the week, someday. Now, everything you were going to do someday is on the calendar. Want to retire someday? You'll really want this. A My Social Security account at socialsecurity.gov. You can estimate your future benefits and manage current benefits online. Millions of people have a My Social Security account. Get yours today, because someday is here at socialsecurity.gov.
Real Virginia is proudly produced by the Virginia Farm Bureau Federation. Since 1926, Farm Bureau has been working to preserve Virginia farms and our rural heritage. Visit our website at virginiafarmbureau.com.
Home will always be Virginia, between the Blue Ridge and Chesapeake Bay, Atlantic to Appalachia, home in my heart always.
Hello everyone and welcome to Real Virginia, a show about Virginia agriculture and the people who produce all of the wonderful products we enjoy, brought to you by the Virginia Farm Bureau. Virginia's new Secretary of Agriculture and Forestry wants to help small farmers succeed. Now's the time to plan what to plant for hummingbirds and butterflies next summer, and a Virginia foundation helps farmers find grant money and start their own agribusinesses. Welcome back, everyone. We're here at Old House Vineyards in Culpeper County, where there is also a craft distillery on site. Now, this small farm operation got some help from the Virginia Fairs Foundation. We're going to have a story later on in the show about Virginia Fairs. But first, Dave Miller tells us the state's newest cabinet secretary wants to help small farmers make a profit.
Virginia's new Secretary of Agriculture and Forestry, Basil Gooden, still has his hand in the operation of his family farm in Buckingham County. He, his brother, and 2 sisters raise more than 50 head of black Angus beef cattle, and he does most of the work in the field. But he values the opportunity to reconnect with his past.
Being raised here on this farm and in this community really instilled me with so many values. We are located on Shelton Store Road here in Buckingham County, and Shelton Store Road is named after my grandparents who owned a country store here right down the road. And growing up, I could see how vital and how important that country store was to this community. And people from all over came to this country store, blacks, whites, everybody who lived in this community. And it made a big impact in the development of this community. So that's the spirit that I was raised in, seeing how my grandparents gave to this community. My parents were educators.
From those rural roots, Gooden rose to earn a Ph.D. in public health. Before his appointment, he was a leader in the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development and served as Virginia head of the USDA's Rural Development Office. This background and experience gave him a passion for helping farmers and rural Virginians become financially successful. The state has just announced a new farm and business development program for small and mid-sized farms, typically 1 or 2 persons, or an agribusiness of no more than 20 employees. Gooden says the grants are meant to help them do in-depth business planning.
Making sure that the small farmer will have an opportunity to be able to sell their goods and commodities to these bigger businesses or even internationally. So what we're looking at is developing the capacity of farmers on the business side so they could really take advantage of new markets, whether it's domestic markets or international markets.
Virginia's farm and forestry sectors are still the largest in the state's economy, worth about $70 billion each year. In recent years, another grant program focused helping ag and forest-related businesses grow. Those grants help boost the overall farm economy. But Gooden says the new VDAX grant program is a better fit for many producers.
The Virginia Farm Business Development Program, farmers focus so much on being the best farmer that they can be, whether it's their crops or the livestock that they produce. This program is a grant up to $5,000 that will allow farmers to focus on the business aspect of their operation, whether it's developing a marketing plan, doing more online selling of their commodities, to have a presence online. But a big issue that I am very concerned about, and this grant could be utilized for, is farm succession planning or forest succession planning. That's a significant issue here in the Commonwealth of Virginia because the average age of farmers here in the Commonwealth is about 59 years old.
Grants like these can even be used to set up family trusts to make sure the farm stays in the family for generations to come. While promoting the huge industries of agriculture and forestry is a key role for him, it's safe to say Gooden's heart is still with the small farmer. In Buckingham County, this is Dave Miller.
While President Lincoln helped create the U.S. Department of Agriculture in 1862, the head of that department wasn't a cabinet minister until 1889. That's when Norman Coleman of Missouri held the post for a month under President Cleveland. More than a century later, Virginia created a Secretary of Agriculture post. Although farming is a major part of the state's economy, and the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services was created in 1877, the state's first secretary wasn't appointed until the end of 2004. Robert Bloxham held the post for 6 years. Basil Gooden is Virginia's third secretary, following Todd Haymore.
I'm Mark Viette. Coming up on In a Garden, I'm going to talk about how you can enjoy butterflies and hummingbirds right in your own backyard. Stay with us.
Looking for these? You drive buzzed. It could be one very expensive ride.
First, you gotta make bail. Then pay me to get your car back.
Your insurance premiums will go through the roof.
And my legal fees just keep adding up. All told, it could end up costing you $10,000.
Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Winter is the time of year that most gardeners dream of what they will plant in the spring to see bloom by the summer. And if those dreams include butterflies and hummingbirds, Mark Viette has some suggestions in the garden.
Think about creating a habitat for butterflies and hummingbirds in an area that not only they enjoy, but an area that you can enjoy. And it would be just like here on this patio right outside the back of the house. And you can surround your patio with plants that wildlife enjoys. One of my favorite plants right here is Salvia black and blue. Out of all the plants that you could probably plant, it's the #1 plant that will attract more hummingbirds than anything else. And this plant really starts blooming late in the season, and for those of us who live in very cold areas, you may have to bring it in the winter and protect it, but you could just be sitting right here on a patio, relaxing, and if you wait long enough, the hummingbirds will come within 3 feet of where you're sitting. There are other plants that will also attract hummingbirds and butterflies, like butterfly shrubs, which is right behind this plant here. Some other great plants to consider would be the variety called White Profusion, which is a pure white butterfly bush. In a lot of the research that they've done, they have found that this white form of the butterfly bush attracts more butterflies and hummingbirds than the other types. And right here, around the base of the rock garden wall, it's another plant that's called plumbago. And it's Ceratostigma plumbaginoides. It's a hardy perennial, comes back every year. And just a few minutes ago, there was a sphinx moth. Now, I've always called them hummingbird moths. They look like baby hummingbirds, but really it's a moth. But these are great garden plants that you can incorporate throughout your garden, because remember, hummingbirds tend to be territorial. So you want lots of these plants, so you have a lot of food sources for the wildlife. There is a wide variety of plants that you can plant in your garden. I have found to attract more butterflies, you might want to plant long, narrow beds, maybe 10 feet long, could even be 20 feet long, but it might only be 3 or 4 feet wide. The butterflies love to travel up and down the same exact plant when it's in full bloom. Consider planting some fall blooming asters for butterflies. Now again, you're going to be able to attract fritillarias, mourning cloaks, monarchs, swallowtails, sulfur butterflies, and in addition, of course, the sphinx moth and the hummingbirds. One of my favorite plants here is known as the summer blooming phlox. It blooms pretty much July, August, September, October, almost until frost. Even pollinators like the carpenter bees love this perennial flower. Remember, it's easy to plant a hummingbird and butterfly garden right in your own backyard. I'm Mark Viette. Join me next time in the garden.
For more garden tips, go to inthegardenradio.com.
Are you ready to celebrate the new year with style and taste? Chef John Maxwell starts us off right with a new twist on an old favorite, next in the heart of the home.
From our farms to your table. Virginia dairy farm families are dedicated to providing your family with nutritious, high-quality milk.
I'm Dan Myers, a fifth-generation dairy farmer from Virginia.
I'm Roy Vanderhyde, a first-generation dairy farmer from Virginia.
I'm Gerald Heatwolf, a third-generation dairy farmer from Virginia.
I am dedicated to dairy, my cows,
my milk,
and our land.
Black-eyed peas are a traditional New Year's dish in Virginia and other southern states. Chef John Maxwell joins us today with a fresh new twist for this recipe in the heart of the home.
Hi, welcome to Heart of the Home. We're here at Meadow Hall in Meadow Event Park in Doswell, Virginia, and we get to play with great Virginia food every week. So today we're going to be making a black-eyed pea salad. It's really nice, kind of like a salsa, kind of like a salad, but it's really, really a lot of fun. And we're going to put that over some cornbread. All right, so we're going to start the cornbread first. I've got some cream here with some butter in it, getting hot. In here I've got a mix of cornmeal and flour. Now for the actual proportions of all of this, go to my website at chefjohnmaxwell.com and you can get the recipe and print it out if you'd like. But I'm going to mix this up, the cornmeal and the flour, and I'm going to take and add a little bit of salt, a little bit of baking powder, all right, and a little bit of sugar. I'm going to mix this all up. Now this is just about ready. All I want to do is melt this butter in here. I've got the milk product, the cream, and the butter in here, and now that's melted. Now it's hot, and I'm going to pour it into this flour mix and let it bloom. Bloom means that the grains of cornmeal and flour will absorb the liquid and get a little bit thicker. Right? So I'm going to add that in here. All right. Going to add it that way, turn this off, and mix this up. And we're just going to hold that for a second, let it kind of absorbed all of that liquids. And now we're going to add a couple of eggs. I'm going to add these one at a time and mix it in. Since this is a hot mixture, I don't want to crack my eggs into it all at once because then the yolks will start to cook or the whites will start to cook and it will affect the way this works. All right. You see how smooth that's getting? One more in there. All right. You get that mixed in. And that's all I need to do to this. Now I'm going to put it into a buttered pan. All right. And this is one of my favorite pans. I got this when I was in Korea. It's called a dolsot, and it's used in Korean cooking a lot, but the stoneware works really good for things like cornbread. So I'm going to add this to it. And get this into a hot oven, about 400 degrees, for anywhere from 18 to 25 minutes. All right, that cornbread is almost ready, so while we're waiting on that, we're going to go ahead and make this salad. All right, so I've got a pan here, right, that I'm going to put all these vegetables in. I'm going to start out with black-eyed peas. Now, I like to use frozen black-eyed peas or fresh black-eyed peas. Canned peas sometimes fall apart. They get those little pieces of black hull in them that make my salad look a little messy. They're fine. They're very good. They got good flavor, but neatness counts to me. So I've got these black-eyed peas. I bought frozen, and then I blanched them off. Right? Now I'm going to add some celery. About 2 cups of celery. I'm going to add some red pepper, some green onion, some cilantro, a little bit of jalapeno pepper, and I'm going to make a salad dressing now to go on these. Get rid of all of this stuff so I don't get yelled at. My dressing is going to be really a basic oil and vinegar dressing. So I'm going to start out with a little bit of olive oil. I'm using some Spanish olive oil because it's nice and floral. And I like that in this particular dressing. There's a lot of earthiness to the black-eyed peas, so I don't want a real earthy oil for that. So I've got that. The recipe calls for white vinegar. Or you can use any kind of vinegar that you want really in here. Right? I'm going to be using a sushi vinegar. Sushi vinegar has a little bit of sugar in it, right, that helps with the flavor. It softens it up a little bit, and it's going to go nicely with this. So I'm going to add that in there. I'm going to add some celery seed here. Right. Some sugar. A little bit of mustard powder. Some pepper and some salt. I'm going to whisk this up, make sure everything's blended nicely. All right, now I'm going to pour that over you can see the thickness here. Just pour that in there and mix it up. This is a very complicated recipe. Get it all mixed so that it's got all that color, confetti-like in there. Now, I have to taste it. I don't know. I have to taste some more, just to make sure. That's very good. All right, so we're all set on this. Let's see if that cornbread is ready yet. When it is, we'll get set up. Does not look beautiful. It smells gorgeous. All right? I'm going to cut a couple of wedges out of here. All right, and put these down. Ooh, ooh, ooh. That's hot. So I've got 2 pieces of cornbread in here. And now I'm going to take this black-eyed pea salsa and put it on there. Get plenty of it in there. And there we've got it. Move it over here so everybody can see it good. All right. It says cornbread and black-eyed pea salsa, just in time for New Year's and for the holidays. So it also makes a really good dish for Super Bowl. Every week we make recipes using great Virginia-grown food. We make them in our kitchen so you can make them in your kitchen. Join us next week on Heart of the Home when we get to play with more great Virginia food.
Recipes from the Heart of the Home can be found on Chef Maxwell's website, chefjohnmaxwell.com. While eating black-eyed peas on New Year's Day is an old Southern tradition, there are plenty of other lucky New Year's foods from around the world. In Spain and Portugal, it's traditional to eat 12 grapes at midnight. Stewed kale sprinkled with sugar and cinnamon is popular in Denmark. Germans consume sauerkraut, and Americans serve collard greens. The folded leaves of the greens are meant to represent money and prosperity in the new year. Pork is a popular dish in Cuba, Spain, Portugal, Hungary, and Austria, as well as the U.S., and fish is extremely popular for New Year's feasts around the world.
Earlier in our show, we told you about a state program that helps small farmers with their business plans. Turns out there's been an independent foundation doing similar work for the past 12 years.
Virginia FAIRS is an acronym for Virginia Foundation for Agriculture, Innovation, and Rural Sustainability. It was established in 2005 with the help of the Virginia Farm Bureau Federation. The foundation offers technical assistance, runs software programs, performs feasibility studies, and provides business plans to help farmers move from just raising products to adding value to them, or to expand their value-added production.
For instance, if somebody was producing grapes, if they were just selling their grapes to a winery, they would just get the price of the grapes. Well, we would help them look at, say, if they wanted to put in a winery themselves, what would it cost to put in the winery? Well, they'd probably spend about $1 million putting in the winery. Well, if they spent that $1 million, and then how much money would they make out of it if they spent the $1 million? Would they actually make money at the end of it after they spent the $1 million? So we help them look at the whole business and then make a decision on a piece of paper before they actually spend that $1 million in real life moving forward.
In the last 3 years, Virginia FAIRS has worked with more than 100 producers to develop 45 business plans and apply for more than 40 grants. To date, it has helped bring $6 million to the Old Dominion countryside. Virginia farmers produce a wide variety of agricultural products, but it's rare for any one farmer to produce large volumes of any one crop or commodity. And that means that they're at the mercy of the world market determining how low a price may go. That's why it's fairly common for a Virginia producer to work a second job off the farm. Virginia FAIRS hopes to make it easier for farmers to give up that second job and stay on the farm full time.
We work with anybody and everybody. I mean, we are inclusive, not exclusive. We work with small farmers, big producers, small producers, you name it, we'll work with them. Small groups, big groups. You know, that's what we're here for. We're here to help people either transition from commodity production or to expand their value-added business that they already have.
What can farmers do to add value? Cook sees a huge potential for locally grown products. Consumers are demanding more and more information about their food. Cook says they want to know, did it come from Virginia? Did it come from Mexico? Where did it come from in the world? They want to know who produced it.
A lot of people call me and say, Chris, I've got an idea. Can you help me transition that idea from my brain onto a piece of paper and into a business? That's where they can truly start from an idea. We do business development. That's what we do. And at the end of the rainbow, you know, the carrot at the end there, the gold pot, there is a grant. Anything up to $250,000. So there is quite a big pot there. And, you know, it's there to be had. And we try to help people get to there.
To contact Chris Cook and Virginia FAIRS, you can go online to their website, vafairs.com, or you can call directly at 804-290-1111. Cook says they're ready to help develop your farming idea into a concept and then into a business if the potential is there.
That's going to do it for this edition of Real Virginia. We are so glad you could join us to celebrate the bounty Virginia has to offer. Whether it's in your home, your garden, or your landscape, we are proud to say that this is Real Virginia. So for everyone from the Virginia Farm Bureau, thanks for watching. Make it a good week.
Home will always be Virginia, between the Blue Ridge and Chesapeake Bay, Atlantic to Appalachia, home in my heart always.
A digital revolution is taking place. Sweeping changes being brought about by computing power and mobile technology are here. How do you see life being different in 10, 20, 30 years from now? How will the digital economy change Arlington? Arlington County is hosting a series of public discussions about these very issues. Join us on February the 15th at the Central Library Auditorium from 7 to 8:30 p.m. and be part of the future to seek and discover the unharnessed power of technology and define Arlington's digital destiny.
Use the county's snow form on our website to report snow issues to ensure a timely response. We will be accepting reports based on the phase your street is slated to be cleared. If you live on an arterial or secondary road, you can report your issue after Phase 2 is completed. If you live on a Phase 3 street, which is a residential street, you can report your issue after we finish Phase 3.
Do you know where you can plan your family's next picnic and nature walk? Travel back in time without leaving your chair? Or maybe take a tour of Arlington County's public art, even when it's raining? Well, here at Arlington County's GIS Mapping Center, we can help you do all of this and more from your desktop computer or mobile device. GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems, and we gather and analyze data to create maps, charts, and 3D models of the world around you. Whether it's planning a safe route to school for your child or planning a bike route on over 100 miles of trails, we've got you covered. And if you need a bike, we can show you where all the Capital Bike Share stations are, repair stations, and restrooms for your next adventure on wheels. Finding the nearest police station, fire hydrant, bus stop, or voting station couldn't be easier thanks to Arlington County's GIS Mapping Center. Our team supports Arlington's residents, county government, and other organizations. We provide aerial photo analysis, data maintenance, digitizing support, and much more. Providing these tools empowers you to make better informed decisions about your work, life, and recreation in the county. See what GIS is doing for Arlington and see what it can do for you. Visit maps.arlingtonva.us and get started.
Since I got adopted, I've learned a lot about these humans.
I know. I mean, check out these two. It's Flirt City over here. I think she's getting his number.
Nice.
Your human's got some sweet moves.
Takes after his dog.
Welcome and good evening. Thank you for joining us as we begin our Defining Digital Destiny with Arlington and Sean Dubravac. Arlingtonians have a long history of being involved in defining the future of the community. In fact, I was at the 100-year anniversary of the Civic Federation this spring. As we plan forward, we need you on this part of the journey as well. It's not about planning the plan, it's about planning a discussion that will dialogue how Arlingtonians see themselves and see the world where they live, work, and play. The stakes are high. There are new opportunities that are being created faster than we can keep up. In fact, in 60 Minutes this past weekend, there was a conversation about artificial intelligence. The benefits, Watson as a supercomputer, and how it can provide diagnosis and cancer patients, as well as some risky things. Well, who makes the ethical decision about a driverless car? Is it Congress or is it tech companies? We have to be part of this conversation. Tonight, we'll set the stage for future discussions that are relevant right now. We want to talk about areas that will impact us: mobility, place, wellness, learning, and livelihood. In order to share our experience, we're streaming this live. We have a YouTube chat feature that anybody who is not present can also participate in the conversation. In addition, we have a Twitter handle, hashtag ARL Digital Destiny, if anybody wants to ask questions, either at home or in the audience. As members of this audience, you are agreeing to be part of this being videotaped. And we hope that people will ask questions, so this is an engagement for us. We have several distinguished guests in the audience. We have Senator Mary Margaret Whipple, as well as John Vistad, and Libby Garvey. Ms. Garvey has had the recent experience of hosting her own author talk, so she's very familiar. And we appreciate Ms. Garvey's opportunity to be here and introduce Sean Dubravac. So Ms. Garvey, who is the county board chair, has also served as chair of the school board, and we're very honored to have her. With that, I welcome Ms. Garvey.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry to be a little bit late. We're over here? Okay. This is my hood, and I've never had problems finding parking in my favorite parking space, but I did. So thank you. I think you introduced John, who was here. John Bisset. There he is. And we have Victor Hoskins. Did you introduce everybody? And Ruben Varghese, did you make those introductions? Not yet? Did she make those introductions? No? Ruben, it's very nice to see you. Thank you. Did you? Yes, all right. Mary Margaret Whipple, Senator Mary Margaret Whipple is here, and her husband Tom, very, very big into digital issues. You are coming to a community that really is big on this. We're really glad to have you here. So thank you so much for coming. And Jack Brown, our emergency manager, is here with some of his department. Jim Schwartz, deputy manager. Wow. We've got quite a lot of people here. Again, I apologize for being late. I have a few things that I'm supposed to say. So let me check and see what those are. One of them, not surprising, Arlington, we've long prided ourselves being visionary in this area. Senator Mary Margaret Whipple was on the county board at one point and helped kind of get us to where we are today. Thank you so very much. And, you know, there's no doubt that at this day and age, technology is really important. And I am looking forward to the discussion tonight because one of the things that I read in one of the write-ups, I have not read your book, I apologize, but I'm hoping to learn a lot tonight, was that you think we won't need cities anymore. And one of the things we pride ourselves here in is that we are a digital community city, and we're planning on attracting more people here. So that I'm going to be interested to hear how that all works out, because even though these devices change us in a lot of different ways, we're still people. And people need to be social. So I'm thinking we all still need to gather together. So I'm going to be listening to that for those points, and that's really great. And I think also we need to be thinking about, which I think we all are, so what are we going to look like in 20 years, 40 years, 60 years? That's some of our job here. And I think with no further ado, I'm going to stop here. Thank everybody for coming, our staff, our leaders in this community. Thank you for being here. And I'm going to be fascinated with the discussion. Thank you. Can't wait to hear it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So with that, we have a microphone because we are going to be streaming it live. So if you have a question, I will need to have you hold the microphone so that everyone hear you, not in the audience, but outside. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jack Belcher, our Chief Information Officer, and Alexandra Fox, Business Librarian. Thank you very much.
So Dr. Sean Dubravac is Chief Economist and Director of Research at the Consumer Technology Association, Arlington-based U.S. trade association representing more than 2,000 consumer tech companies. CTA owns and produces CES, the world's largest gathering place for all who thrive on the business of consumer technologies. In his role, Dr. Dubrovac provides crucial economic analysis to association and industry leaders. He is also a highly regarded futurist who writes frequently on technology trends underpinning diverse industries. He is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Digital Destiny: How the New Age of Data Will Transform the Way We Work, Live, and Communicate, which explores how the world's mass adoption of digital technologies portends the beginning of a new era for humanity in the realms of economics, health, travel, and culture. We are privileged to have Dr. Dubrovac here this evening. Thank you.
I'll start off, Sean. Thank you so much for being here. Sean has been a loyal supporter, and we didn't know each other beforehand.
That's right.
And I reached out to Sean and asked if we could get his support, and you've been there, as your company has for Arlington, so thank you so much. So let's start off talking about your book and your thoughts. You say we're on the eve of a revolution like we've never seen before. And you look back to 1450, and you talk about Johannes Gutenberg inventing the printing press, and you said that's going to outpace that. You talk about Thomas Edison inventing a light bulb, but you said light bulb really didn't mean much until he put a power plant in to power those light bulbs. And so here we are, it's 2016, and you're saying that we're going to have some sort of revolution taking place that's going to impact just about all aspects of our life, especially here in Arlington County. And I'm going to leave you to this one saying you say, and I'm going to see what your reaction to all of that is, and if you could give us a background on it. You say, we're drowning in data, but starving for wisdom.
Yeah, well, so with that, Jack, thank you so much. It's great to be here. I'm humbled to be here. It's wonderful to support what Arlington is doing. As you mentioned, we've been a long-time resident of Arlington, and we're very proud to be in Arlington. And I think Arlington is extremely well positioned to be a leader in this revolution that's taking place. One of the things that's happening is that you have a number of very diverse forces coming together at the same time. And these have been forces that have been building for a very long time. First digital computer, the ABC, we get in 1942. The first hard drive we get in 1956. So we've been putting these building blocks together for a very, very long time, but it's just now that everything is starting to come to fruition. It really wasn't until the 80s that home computing became ubiquitous. It wasn't until the 90s where we really started to think about storage being ubiquitous. So it took 40, 50 years of that technology being in the marketplace to really start to grab hold. As late as 2000, as a country, only about 3% of us are on broadband connectivity. Only about 40% of us have home computers. So when you think about all of the change that has taken place over the last 60 years, 70 years, most of it has taken place in the last 15 years. And so it's all of these forces coming together now. Connectivity, it's the broad digitization of devices. 1980, we get the CD player, which is really the first consumer-facing digital product to see mass market appeal and be mass market adopted. And then it would be another 20 years, 1998, that we see digital televisions introduced. But then, in quick succession, we began to replace all of these analog products with their digital counterparts. 2001, we get the original iPod. 2003, we get smartphones. 2007, we get the original iPhone. And so, quickly, one after another, we start to see all of these analog products, which we had lived with happily for 50, 60 years, be replaced with digital parts. At the same time, we start to embed sensors into them. So prior to 06, 07, we were using sensors for a number of different things. We were using things like accelerometers to deploy airbags in vehicles, but most of that was happening in the background. Consumers weren't seeing that as a forward-facing, consumer-facing technology. Then 2006, Nintendo introduced the Wiimote, which embedded accelerometers into the controller and allowed the user to digitize what they were doing in physical space and incorporate that into the game. Apple took that same accelerometer, added it to the original iPhone, And the original idea in 2007 was simply to change the orientation of the phone so that you could go from portrait to landscape and just switch it back and forth. And when Steve Jobs talked about that technology and demoed it with the original iPhone launch, it was all about changing the view that you had on that phone. Little did we know that other inventors and innovators would take that technology and apply it in a number of different innovative ways. And so where we are today is deploying a technology that was, at the time, relatively expensive. Each axis of motion capture in 2006, 2007 added about $7 per axis of motion capture. So for XY motion capture, being able to switch your phone from landscape to portrait added about $15 to the bill of materials. Today, the cost of that is pennies. And most manufacturers that I talk to don't even really think about the cost when they're building the products. And so they're just putting it into the technology, and we're seeing it show up in incredibly diverse places. Under Armour, earlier this year, released a pair of shoes that has embedded in them the exact same accelerometers that were in that original iPhone, that were in the Wiimote. And with it, we can use it to capture activity levels for the life of the shoe. Battery technology has improved enough. We still have a lot to go there, but it has improved enough that the technology outlasts the length of the shoe. You don't have to charge the technology. So it's waterproof. You can wash them. You can do other things like that. And so you see technology showing up in all of these places where it didn't exist before. There was already information there. It just wasn't being captured in a systematic, dynamic, continuous way. So if you wanted to measure the number of steps you took, you had to do so in a very rudimentary way. You had to do so in an analog way. You would have had to carry around a piece of paper with you or do it some other way. But because we can now capture it digitally, we can do it in continuous time. We can capture information that was already there but was difficult to garner. And then we can start to redeploy that information in very productive applications. So that's where we are, and that gets to the heart of the quote that you started with, Jack, that we are increasingly being inundated with information, and the next big step is to take all of that information and start to then garner intelligence from it. So for example, we can deploy cameras widely, we can measure activity levels widely, and so we can start to look at which city blocks in a city should be zoned for retail, which might be better zoned for residential. We might be able to look at how a city is being utilized by its residents and then suggest that maybe this would be a great place for a coffee shop or a restaurant because of the time of day that people are walking by it or the type of people that are walking by it. And so you can start to take scarce resources, and in an urban setting, real estate is an extremely scarce resource, and deploy it in the most productive way. And because you have the deployment of these sensors, you can then start to monitor that and measure that over time and redeploy these scarce resources as needed. And so you see that that thought going into pretty much everything today. So taking these scarce resources, figuring out what's the most productive application for those scarce resources, and then redeploying them. And that's at the heart of every technological movement we see today, whether it be self-driving cars, whether it be exploring how drones might be used. Everything that you see percolating on the surface is coming about because of these building blocks that have been in the works for 60 or 70 years, the confluence of all of those coming together at the same time, and the prices coming to the point where they become very inexpensive to deploy, so you can deploy them widely in non-traditional places, and then taking that information and making really interesting decisions based upon that information. And that will show up everywhere. I mean, if you look around your lives today, we still live very analog existences with the infusion of technology in a very limited way. And we are surrounded by information that exists in an analog physical world, but slowly, surely, we will begin to digitize all of that information and then utilize that information to make better informed decisions and to get stronger recommendations. And we can talk a lot about those type of things.
Just getting back to Ms. Garvey's point earlier, in your book you mentioned technology wants what life wants, and you have mentioned how this impacts the human experience. Can you expand on that a little further?
Yeah, so I think if we look at the way I was approaching it was that data and information is this living organism that wants to be utilized, it wants to be deployed, and it wants to be free, and it really wants to be able to influence that environment, just like a human would want to be heard and want to influence their environment. We see the same thing happening with information and with data, and so the deployment of these tiny, inexpensive sensors today is enabling us to essentially free information locked previously in this physical existence. And so, the next 15 years, I think, is really going to be defined by cataloging this information, thinking about how do we store it, how do we utilize it, and then starting to look for those underlying nuggets of information. And that will really happen when we start to blend data together. So, for example, my wearable might be able to tell me how stressed I am, how excited I am, how depressed I am. I might be able to tie that into something like my commute data. So Waze knows how long it took me to get here. And it knows a lot about where I drive in Arlington, how long it takes me, what time of day I go. It's getting quite good at predicting where I'm going because it pulls in other information now. It looks at my calendar and it sees information on my calendar, so it knows when I'm commuting home. So those bits of information taken together, my calendar, my commute data, my wearable that tells me how stressed I am, can then start to provide these more robust recommendations about, hey, Sean, we see that you're really stressed during your commute. We think today if you adjust your commute 3 minutes, you'll have a much more enjoyable commute. It looks like traffic's clearing along the routes that you like to take. And so wait 3 minutes and see how that improves your life. So we're going to start to use these data to get better recommendations that actually make us better, make us happier, help us to make more informed decisions. And then over time, we're going to allow those machines to make decisions on our behalf. And we're already seeing that technology show up in the marketplace. Earlier this year at CES, for example, Whirlpool launched a pair of washers and dryers that connect to the internet. And they also connect to Amazon Dash. So they monitor something as simple as the number of loads of laundry you do, and they order on your behalf laundry detergent when you start to run low.
Just for those who may not know about Amazon Dash, it is a direct order button.
Yeah, so it's a direct order button, but you can also have the machines. So the idea would be that you would, and with some of the applications today, you would push that button. You can also imagine that Amazon speaks directly to a machine that's monitoring that and orders things on your behalf. So today, about 7% of orders of our consumer spending happens online. But if you think about machines starting to order things on our behalf, it could easily get to 40, 50%. Today, analysts mostly think it maybe doubles. Maybe it gets to 15, maybe it gets to 20%. You could easily imagine an environment where half of the purchases we make are happening online. That could be food delivery services, that could be machines ordering things on our behalf. And so when you start to think about that dynamic, it has massive ripple effect throughout the entire system. So, and I think that's one of the really important things to remember about digitization is it doesn't just impact what's happening in the digital world anymore. It also happens to impact what's happening in the physical world. Retail stores change because we can order things online. Now, it isn't just that we get to order them online. It's this huge ripple effect throughout the entire environment.
So we're government, and we deal in predictability, low risk. And you're talking about a world where there's going to be unpredictability and possible high risk. So what can government do about it? And you call this the digital destiny. So there's a sense of an inevitability about that, isn't that not?
Yes, so I think the title was definitely chosen to suggest that this is an inevitable future, that we are clearly moving into a world where The lines are blurring between our physical lives that we live in, the physical world we live in, and the digital world in which we interact in. And some of the terms that we have historically used have become archaic. We used to talk about going online because it was an activity that we did. And then we also went offline. We left what was ever happening. We had very separate identities. Our online identity was separate from our physical identity. There's a classic New Yorker cartoon where there's a bunch of dogs and they say, you can't tell that I'm a dog on the internet. But no longer is that really true because those worlds are blurring and blending so much that we toggle seamlessly between them. And so there is no more this sense of going online, coming offline. They're blurring and they're blending very, very quickly. And I think we drastically today underestimate the impact it will have because we tend to think about things multiplying from where they are today, but we don't think about exponential growth from where they are today. So we think about, okay, imagine a city environment that has, rather than 1,000 cameras, 10,000 cameras, 100,000 cameras, but it's hard to fathom an environment that has millions of cameras. And what do we do with that amount of information? And what are the type of things that we can start to do?
So the pace of change is, you talk about in your book, it's not linear anymore. It's exponential. And you talk about something called Moore's Law. And if you just talk a little bit about that, just frame the discussion, what that means.
Yeah, sure. So Moore's Law is essentially the laws that govern how quickly chip processing powers can get. And it goes back a number of decades to the number of transistors that could fit on a microprocessor. And there's a great story that looks at a chessboard. And the guy who invented chess, so the story goes, was an inventor in India many decades ago, centuries ago. And so he goes to the king, and the king loves chess so much that he wants to reward him for inventing this game. And so he says, well, just pay me a grain of rice on the first square and double it with each subsequent square. And so the king thinks he's got this great bargain, so he begins to pay out the rice, but he sees how quickly it begins to multiply, especially when you get to the back half of the chessboard. So when the king quickly realizes he can't pay this, he then, as the story goes, kills the inventor of chess. That's right. So be careful what you ask for, I guess, is the... but we are clearly in the back half of that chessboard where exponential growth is taking hold, and the growth that's happening just on the next square in this chessboard, in this advancement, outweighs all of the development that we have seen in the first half of the chessboard. Take, for example, something very simple like the ability of computers to recognize verbal commands. We are quickly moving into a world of verbal computing. So the way we measure the accuracy of verbal computing was something called the word error rate. And the word error rate essentially is how many words does the computer get right, how many does it get wrong. It was really first introduced about 1995. Microsoft was one of the pioneers in that space. Word error rate in 1995 is 100%. I mean, it can't understand anything that's being spoken. The word error rate is very, very high. By 2013, it's about 25%. So we make pretty good progress from 1995 to 2013. In the next 36 months, we go from about 25% word error rate, so 1 out of every 4 words coming back as an incorrect command, to about 3 to 4% word error rate where we are today. So all of the advancements in that technology over 30 years have taken place in the last 36 months. And that is true with a number of technologies, not just with vocal computing, but in a number of places. And so these things that we have been imagining or thinking about are now coming to fruition today because of the deployment of technologies. You look at something like a self-driving car, it's nothing more today than the cars we see on the road coupled with sensors and software. So it's taking parts that we are putting in our smartphones, that Nintendo put in the Wiimote, that we've used in all of these different places, and applying them to a bigger solution.
I want to take a second to ask a quick question. I don't know if anyone in the audience wants a question, but from I'm just curious. There's a lot of amazing things that are happening. Why is it important for Arlington to have this conversation right now?
So it is going to touch everybody's life. And I speak around the world to executives everywhere who think, this really isn't going to touch me. But it is such a pronounced impact that it will fundamentally change everything that we know and everything that we recognize. So it will change the type of decisions that we make. Where do I live? Where do I work? What type of work do I do? And I'm not so worried that it replaces us anytime soon. But we do see how technology has infused into the type of work that we already do. Most of us probably use smartphones to do our work. Most of us probably use computers. And because we use computers and because we use smartphones, we do different work than we would have done 30 years ago. And it has touched every job. And that will continue to happen. Already there are fast food restaurants in China that are run completely by robots. And so what does that mean for the people who used to work in a fast food restaurant? I don't think that means that we'll have fast food restaurants in the future that don't have people working in them, but I think they will do drastically different jobs. I think you could imagine that maybe these fast food restaurants, which are operated by robots, start to hire live bands to play at the restaurant. Or maybe they have concierge service, and so you have somebody who's walking around ensuring that there's this personal touch. So you start to move to this element of, I don't know what the right term is, but maybe non-digitized experiences. You see the same thing already playing out in industries that were hit by this revolution early on. So music was digitized, and that significantly impacted the traditional record labels. And you have some now, some bands have been successful at doing pay what you like paying, and in some instances, successful bands have garnered greater funds from that approach than from a traditional payment approach. And so it's changed the type of way that they're monetizing what they bring to the market. Things like live performances now have much higher ticket prices because it becomes a complement to what was digitized. And so it just completely starts to change everything that we know. And we can grab any example from any job in Arlington County, from any aspect of life in Arlington County, and see how that could possibly change in the decades to come as this digitization more fully engulfs every piece of our lives.
I think we have some questions, possibly.
We do. We have a question, and it's an interesting one because it talks a little bit about the environment and how you see data as nest and wink, and you think how is it going to affect the power usage, and is it going to change the adoption? So are we going to see a benefit in the community based on a wide adoption of tools such as nest and wink?
Yeah, so I think what you see early on is forces coming from multiple directions. So you have consumers self-selecting to digitize elements inside their home. My front door is digitized because I put a digital lock on it now. And so when I approach my door, it recognizes me from my phone and unlocks itself. On the rare occasion that I've gotten home and my phone's dead, and I go and I open my door and it's locked, I have to pause for a minute because I go, how do I get in my house? And then I realize I have these things in my pocket called keys that still will lock that door. But I use them so infrequently that I'm just so used to my phone doing this and it all interacting with me just simply existing. And so if you think about these different forces, on one element you have the consumer self-selecting to bring in these digital technologies. You have businesses and government working to bring in these technologies. Early on, I think the choices will be to look at these payback periods. So if the savings outweighs the cost of the device, then it makes a lot of sense. And that's why you've seen early adoption around thermostats and other things like that, because there's a clear payback period. You're able to save money from energy costs by implementing the technology. And then over time, we'll start to implement and add other technologies that may not have such a clearly defined payback period, but bring some other utility into our lives. So I think what you'll start to have happen is appliances will let us know the best time of day to run based upon energy prices, based upon other environmental elements. We'll start to deploy sensors more widely that measure air quality. Again, it all goes back to scarce resources and how do we take advantage of scarce resources. Everything in the environment, air quality, water, electricity, all of those at some level are scarce resources. Already we're seeing sprinkler systems connect to the internet. So I'm sure we have all had this experience where we're driving in a neighborhood and you see sprinkler systems going off in the middle of a rainstorm. And the reason they do that is because they're using analog technologies. They have a little plastic cup outside that fills up with water when it rains, and that then toggles the switch to turn on the sprinkler system. Well, if that cup hasn't filled up yet, then the sprinkler system will still turn on. I think in the future, you're already starting to see this technology implemented, but more widely in the future, what will happen is you'll be measuring things like soil, like the water in your soil, and does it even need water? Barcelona is already doing this in a lot of their parks, so that certainly will impact the cities. And I think you'll start to get questions like, hey, Sean, we see that a storm is approaching because we've got water sensors deployed throughout Arlington County. And we see that based upon what we're measuring, you're probably going to get about a 1/4 inch of rain. Do you want us to turn off your sprinkler systems today? And we'll be able to make those decisions. Cities will do it, communities will do it, consumers will do it, and that wide deployment will improve life and will improve those scarce resources significantly.
Thank you, Sean. So do we have any more questions?
For right now, let's go on and talk about some economic development topics I know we had.
So, Jack, would you like to introduce?
Well, we're fortunate tonight to have Victor Hoskins, Director of Economic Development, here today. And I thought it would be a good opportunity for you to talk a little bit about economic development and how you see this digital revolution affecting how we attract and retain the businesses we have in the community. And I thought, Victor, it would be a good opportunity for you to talk about what you're seeing from your perspective as well.
Yeah, so I think just having more information and have it more readily available will help businesses make more informed decisions. So I already gave the example of deployment of different retail space, what retail establishments might make sense in different retail environments. At the end of the day, the county wants businesses to be successful. Businesses want to be successful. And so incentives are all aligned, and that's a great story. And that's where digital information will come into play. So I think that's some of it, taking, again, these scarce resources, deploying them in the most effective way, helping businesses make wise decisions. Inventory management systems are going to change significantly. So if I take my inventory management system and I digitize it and I infuse it into the environment, a number of really interesting things will start to happen. I've seen prototypes, for example, of transparent LCD screens. So you might imagine that these transparent LCD screens would start to show up in your local convenience store. And so prices could be dynamically adjusted based upon the supply and demand of the products that you have, based upon the unique characteristics of that market. So you could have 7-Elevens that are 3 blocks apart, but have different products, have different prices because of the unique characteristics of those individual markets. And you could tie it to something like the delivery truck, so that the delivery truck is communicating with the store, and prices for things like eggs or milk or other products are declining as the truck backs up into the store and does its delivery. So you are selling out of these products just as your inventories are being replenished. Those inventory turns make businesses much more financially viable, improve their bottom line. And so all of these little types of things, what are very little things today, could mean the difference between success and failure.
So is it possible that we will be wealthier as a result?
Yeah, I think we will be wealthy along a number of metrics, because consumers will be able to get the type of things that they want. They'll be able to make the type of decisions that they want. There'll obviously be trade-offs, but those trade-offs will be much more well-informed.
So Victor, if you could talk a little bit about what you're seeing. I mean, I know you've been taking the lead in innovation with Eastern Foundry, 1776. And talk a little bit about what you're seeing in the community.
Well, first of all, I want to say that the CES has been a tremendous partner for us. We actually market at your events now in Las Vegas and in Shanghai, so thank you so much for your support. What we have been seeing is really what's going on right now is a transformation of the economy. Along with this digital revolution, the companies are evolving. I mean, what we're seeing, the companies that are growing rapidly are not the companies that were growing rapidly years ago. As a matter of fact, our stock and trade was government, and it was growing for us for years and years and years. In the last 10 years, there's been dramatic decline. As a matter of fact, we've had a net loss in government jobs. But we still have had a net gain in jobs. Why? Because we've had an explosion in our med tech, in our ed tech, in our big data analytics, in our cybersecurity, in our clean tech. I'll give you a quick example. Out of CEB a number of years ago came a small group of people who started a company called Evolent Health. And Evolent Health was started with like 4 or 5 people in Boston. They're now, I think, a couple of thousand across the country. And they just bought a company, a med tech company in Chicago for $285 million. That company was 4 people just like 6 or 7 years ago. That is the kind of transformation that's taking place, and it is dramatic. So those are the kind of businesses that we're trying to get next to and trying to help grow. And we meet at some of your technology shows.
Well, you could easily imagine that half the people who live in Arlington County in 50 years will be doing jobs that don't even exist today.
I want to interject. We actually have a question from, I think, Twitter about broadband access and how much some of this developments are dependent on high-speed broadband access.
Certainly connectivity is a huge building block, and I know Jack could speak to things that Arlington County is doing and building that backbone for and infrastructure for the deployment of these technologies. Unless data is, if you will, unleashed, it doesn't have as much value. So you really gain the potential of this digitized information when you're able to mix it with other information and provide a fair dose of analytics to it. So just having that information residing locally provides some value. Being able to, in most instances today, we're sending it to the cloud. The analytics is taking place there, and then you're pushing back either the recommendations or the analysis to whatever service or device needs that information. And so being able to do that is certainly a key aspect of what this transformation will look like.
So one of the things I know Peter Diamandis talks about is that the number of stages in terms of disruption of innovation. And he said it starts off with digitalization, which you could say broadband is that. And he says you go through a phase, and that phase is deception, he calls it. Deception meaning that we really don't know, we're not aware that it's happening. And he quotes people like Kodak, who in 1975 invented the digital camera, but said, well, no one's going to use a digital camera, so we'll put that aside. And they went and they stayed with this same process of doing it. They are now out of business, and they're not working. And it's happened in so many. Clayton Christensen talks about the disruptions that have taken place. But Victor, you have to say, I mean, talking to that, there is really while that's there, that could be an asset that means immense value to the community. There's really not that awareness yet of the potential of that. Are we not in the deception phase, you think, at that point?
Well, Schumpeter, back in the 1920s and 30s, postulated that there is a creative destruction process. When jobs go away, there are the jobs created. And I think at that time he was looking at things like telegraph, like, how the telegraph started, then turned into telephone. I mean, these kinds of transitions from, cart and horse and buggy, you had a lot of blacksmiths, and then all of a sudden you have automobile repairmen. I mean, it's a very transitory and destructive process. But the key is the educational attainment of your working population at the level that can catch that transition. I think we all at one time or another are deceived about what's really going on. I mean, we think that that everything is fine in the economy, and then it all of a sudden blows up. I don't think anybody in 1998 thought the economy would blow up in the year 2000, and that was all based on data. These kind of false positives that you may get, and I think that it's that process of false positives, Kodak thinking that, this is going to go on forever, that really kind of deceives us. The key is being observant about the trends, and I think that's what that's what comes out of Digital Destiny. What are the trends? And if you follow the trends, you should be safe. If you have fear of the trends, you're probably going to find yourself where Kodak found itself.
What about there's a question related to jobs. So what is our responsibility as Arlington County to consider with this displacement, and should we be doing anything for those individuals who might lose their jobs? Is there something we should be considering?
Well, one of the things that Arlington County has done better than a lot of communities in our country is educated the youth in an incredible way. In addition to that, it's really attracted some great universities. We have Virginia Tech here, we have George Mason University, we have Marymount University, we have George Washington University. Arlington has really taken a grip on the educational attainment. And if you look at the population of Arlington, darn it, the boomers are as smart as the millennials. It's pretty amazing. I mean, you see masters, bachelors, PhDs among the entire population. 70% of our population is well educated, and I think that's one of our incredible competitive advantages, and we have to keep that. But the key is, how do you link that directly to jobs? That's the part that no one has figured out, and that's what we are trying to figure out now. How do you link that educational attainment directly to jobs? You come out of graduate school, or you're in a cybersecurity program at Marymount University, and you're doing an internship at a cybersecurity company in Arlington County. I mean, that's the kind of linkage that we need to do for that transition.
So, Victor, how can local government support this digital revolution? What do you think?
Well, fortunately, your local government has supported it. Our board has done a tremendous job, particularly in the last year and a half. We've done some very creative and innovative and far-reaching things in terms of business attraction. I mean, I'm sure you guys have heard about us being able to bring in apply predictive technologies, which, actually expand them. They were already here. We actually have had some very fortunate luck in bringing in a Grant Thornton recently. Grant Thornton is going to bring over 1,300 jobs to the county. So we've had some very, very fortunate wins. It's just that we have to continue to be innovative and creative and reach down for those innovative companies.
Thank you.
So we're fortunate tonight. We have Cheryl Foyle here with us today. And Cheryl Foyle's with the Kidder Corporate Group, and she is an investor, and Arlington's an attractive place to invest in real estate. Can you talk a little bit about it, Cheryl?
In real estate?
Why is Arlington attractive to you to invest in?
Well, first of all, we're based here, and we've been here for a long time. We've got a lot of local ties. People talk a lot about why Arlington is great for, cybersecurity is a big one, big data, a lot of the things related to government, regulated industries. Healthcare is another big one, education. One I don't hear a lot that's really true are actually some of our big private businesses. So we focus a lot in construction and real estate, which are incredibly important, especially to the topic of smart cities. And we have tons of large companies that are based here that are finally starting to innovate as data and technology is coming in. And so I'm really excited to see Arlington sort of rise up, along with all of DC really, when it comes to smart city technology in general.
And Sean, you talk about that, about retail, the revolution, disruption taking place in the whole area of retail, of where you live, how you live. I mean, the whole question of Airbnb, what's happening with that, what that means. And I'd be interested in your thoughts in terms of what Cheryl's saying and why that's an attraction and how we might position ourselves to.
I mean, the flow of people start to change when you digitize every element in their life. And we can talk about self-driving vehicles and what that starts to do to an urban setting where you no longer have to park. The utilization rates of cars are around 4 to 5%. The utilization of self-driving cars are expected to be around 95%. So all of a sudden, you fundamentally change everything about that experience. When you no longer put a steering wheel in a vehicle, you don't put a gas pedal or a brake pedal, then you can start to customize the interior of that any way you want. You could put a desk, you could put a bed, you could put a hot tub, you could do anything that you wanted to. And it also means that you may decide you live somewhere else than you work, or you may decide you start to make these other decisions based upon this element of your life becoming digitized. And so, as we see self-driving cars, and self-driving cars are right around the corner. We're a few years away from seeing their deployment. They'll probably start in the fleets. So you'll start to see them with Uber, you'll start to see them with Lyft. Already you've got Uber doing tests in Pittsburgh. So when you see that deployment starting in 5 or 6 years, that will mostly have an impact initially in those urban settings, and it will happen very, very quickly.
So to follow up on that, I mean, you talk about scarcity and abundance. One of the things we have now in the scarcity of is land, open land.
Mm-hmm.
And the concern is we have a lot of, we talked the other day in our management team about we have the need to store things, parts, and we need to put trucks someplace. And where do you find that land? And you can't. And I guess given what's happening, is there something we should be watching, looking for from the perspective of these driverless vehicles and the change in technology in terms of maybe leveraging that abundance to address the scarcity problem we have with space?
Yeah, I think that will definitely be something that these technologies will start to address. I mean, again, it goes to those scarce resources and tackling those problems. And so you could imagine a number of different scenarios. You don't need a lot of parking garages when cars never park. But you will need charging stations because most likely they'll be electric vehicles. You might need places where you're swapping out the batteries. The batteries take a certain amount of time to charge, but that doesn't mean you couldn't swap the batteries out so that vehicle can continue to go.
That's gas stations, I imagine.
That's right. You may not need gas stations. I mean, we're going to get further out when we start to remove those type of places. And maybe in some instances you're replacing gas stations for a place where the batteries are swapped out. But overall, you start to change what that landscape looks like. The other piece is we're definitely, as a world, becoming increasingly urbanized. You see it happening in China. You see it happening in the United States. It wasn't that long ago where well over half of the population in the United States lived in rural settings, and that's no longer the case. We're moving to urban settings, and so places like Arlington will increasingly become urbanized. Those scarce resources will become even more scarce in those settings, and so you'll see drastic change as a result of that. Digitization, sensorization, technology will step in to try to solve those and to address those issues.
I think this is related to something Cheryl said in a previous Digital Destiny video. Can you explain the concept of liquid as it relates to space to the audience so they understand? I think it's a really valid point.
Sure. So, the way things have always worked in the past, you had a piece of land and it was meant to be used for just one thing, and that was what it was for. But we're getting to a place where now we can dynamically in real time figure out who's supposed to be where and using what, right? And that's great because that's really the way that life works. It's chaotic, right? For a while you're living by yourself, and then you're living with 2 people, and then you might have 4 people. Or you want to run a business from the same spot that you where you live, which is the way that things used to be a while ago until we had permits and all sorts of things. And so we're getting to this era where technology is helping us reallocate space, and it's allowing people to sort of like real life to adapt to the crazy, chaotic way that our lives really are. So in Arlington, for example, we actually have a We Live, which is a place where you can go and live month to month. And that's pretty new and that's exciting. And now I'm even seeing pitch concepts for things like bunk beds that you can just rent, and you can live in any city you want, and you pay a flat fee. So people are now saying, do I even need a place to live? Is a home right? Or were we just doing it because logistically that was the only way we knew how to live up until this point? Another thing I wanted to mention that goes back to urbanization is, we keep talking about scarcity and it sounds very negative, but urban planning is about to be revolutionized. I mean, right now your spending habits, where you like to eat, where you live, is all available, but just in these massive silos. At this point, if you live in a city, the restaurant near you, it was probably picked because someone walked up to the person who owned that piece of land and said, I want that restaurant there. But now we could actually figure out there's supposed to be a Thai restaurant there, right? Or that Target should really be 2 blocks further, and that's going to also give us space and hopefully everybody a better life and higher economic utilization within an urban environment.
And at the end of the day, residents in that environment are made better off as well because they're getting the services that they would naturally gravitate towards.
There's a challenge here, I imagine. I mean, there's a generational challenge. I mean, renting a bunk bed is not something is not a top.
You should try it, Jack. Maybe you just haven't tried it yet.
I haven't tried it.
Never too late to try it.
But isn't that? And it goes back to the communication issues. I mean, communicating to the millennials about what, and you're a millennial, right? And talking about what your interests are and what you're trying to achieve. And we sort of miss it, and technologists. I remember we were at a meeting, Victor and I were at a meeting with head of Veneto, Mitchell Scheer, not too long ago. And he said there's really a problem in communication between the technologist and the urbanist. They talk in different languages. They're saying the same thing, but no one understands what the other's saying. So it's like ships passing in the night. Do you see that happening? Is that something we need to pay attention to from a government perspective in terms of how do we reach and talk the language of, say, the millennials? Or am I just being, just me doesn't want to sleep in someone else's bunk bed?
I think you raised, I don't actually want to live in a bunk bed either. I didn't mean to sound too excited, but it was just cool to me that someone was thinking, well, I don't even know if I need this the way that life used to be, right? Maybe I don't even need that, right? And it's natural because now people think, well, maybe I don't even need a car, right? And what else won't we need soon? In terms of the role of government, I actually think one of the biggest things that will help everybody is this continued work on the silos of data to make things more available. Because to Sean's earlier point, the more data that we have and the more that's contextualized and shared between groups, the more we're going to be able to objectively figure out what everybody wants. And that's naturally objective, right? And then we don't have to be so anxious about what this group wants versus that group wants, because we're actually going to know the right thing there is supposed to be a target. It doesn't matter that the millennials are complaining on Twitter.
So I think one thing that we don't talk a lot about, but something I've been thinking a lot about over the last year, is how this starts to change who we are as people. So this book, Digital Destiny, really talks a lot about what the future starts to look like, how it changes the way we work, the way we live, the way we interact. But the next change after that is changing our culture, changing our societies, adjusting the way that we have lived for a very long time. Now, that may take a very long time to come to fruition. That may take 100 years. That may take multiple generations. But I do think over time, digitization is changing who we are and the way we live our lives. And there's little examples that tend to be percolating up. So, most of you think about something as simple as a candy, right? Gummy bears. Gummy bears are a candy that's modeled after a physical object that we see in the world. Bears, maybe it's a soda bottle. I've seen those too. That's what I grew up with. I was at a Five and Dime that's been around for 60 years, and I walked to their candy aisle. They still sell bulk candy, and they had a box of emoji candy. So it was candy modeled after these digital icons that we use in text. So I bought a box, and I took it home, and my kids were like, oh, emoji candy. They were so excited for it because the world they live in is highly digitized, and it blurs and blends into their existence seamlessly. And so we see what we do in the physical world, something as simple as candy today, being changed and altered because of what's happening in the digital world. I think in the future that will become much more pronounced. Everything we know about our society and our culture will start to be influenced by digitization.
You talk about retail, and you talk about retail at different times. But retail is going through a transformation, is it not? In terms of how we look at going and shopping for clothes and doing things. Could you talk, either of you talk or both of you talk about that?
Well, I know one of the big trends right now is showrooms. If you haven't seen them yet, they're starting to open up in a lot of areas here where you can go and physically observe items, but you can't actually buy them there. And there are some tax benefits to that, which is also another problem that I think we're all dealing with at the moment. But you may want to order it online instead. And we're also seeing the opposite trend, which is people are looking online and then going to the store if they want to have it immediately, right? And it's sort of funny that it's sort of these two divisive trends, and it goes back to inefficiency. Ideally, you already know exactly what it is because you can perfectly experience, and then poof, it suddenly appears right next to you, right? And I think that we're getting closer and closer to that. And as we start to get tools like virtual reality, for example, people are saying, well, maybe I don't even need to see a house before I buy it. And honestly, we're still a long way off from that being true, but people are already starting to figure out and how to use that to say, well, I don't need to see that house because I saw enough pictures of it or I saw it online. And people are doing the same thing for retail right now.
Every bunk bed's the same, so you don't really.
That's right.
In the future, we won't need to see the houses. Every bunk bed will be the same.
We have a couple of relevant questions coming from Twitter that I'd like to ask. So that one of the questions is about, we have a diverse population, not only from, millennials and baby boomers, but from an economic perspective. And how are we making sure that, the retail is not just addressing the haves, but the have-nots? And is there anything that we can do to promote digital inclusion and literacy for all of Arlington?
So I think this is very important, and I think that today's tech companies think a lot about this. When I talk to the Ubers and the Lyfts of the world, they think about this a tremendous amount, and they pour a tremendous amount of resources into their services to ensure that they are readily available to every constituent of a community, regardless of any of these, metrics, whether it be income, education, gender, race. And you see that already in the way they deploy the services. They're working on refining that. So you order an Uber today, and the driver doesn't see what your race is, what your income levels are. And so you've already seen success come from these type of platforms because you're getting drivers and ultimately vehicles into neighborhoods that might not have been frequented by other modes of transportation. And that will only become stronger and reinforced as we move into a more fully digitized environment. And so you're seeing Uber think a lot about that, for example, with their self-driving cars as they begin to roll those out into multiple markets. How do we ensure that this is available to every constituent of a community? And how do we ensure that it serves those in need, not just those that have the financial resources?
So then another semi-relevant question to the Uber conversations: what role should government be playing to make sure that our citizens are not adversely impacted?
So I think first and foremost, governments need to foster an innovative environment, and they need to ensure that they don't pigeonhole innovations based upon what they perceive that innovation to address. Because so often we have seen innovations that transform an entire market, though they never intended to transform that market. When Steve Jobs stood up and introduced the original iPhone in 2007, he didn't mention that it was a camera at all. He didn't talk about the camera at all. He talked about it being three things, none of which was a camera. But if you look at today, how that technology not only transformed the mobile internet experience we have, the way we communicate, but it also transformed digital imagery and the way we think about photos and the way, that is a big element of how we communicate today, whether it's Instagram, Snapchat, or other things. We actually use those things that we still call telephones very rarely for telephony. We make very few calls on those devices. We primarily use them to communicate in other ways. And so had policy been implemented in 2007 that limited camera functionality on that device, it would have significantly altered the present that we live in today. I think it's very important that policy take that into account, that they're not able to offer prescriptions that that can foresee the potential positive uses of some of these technologies.
I'd like to add to that too. I think another big thing for government is continuing to push ahead engineering and coding is something that everybody needs to do, and that it's common literacy. You're either building the future or you're going to be living in somebody else's, and it's prevalent all the time. Even at CES this year, there was this awesome haptic feedback suit, and there was only one model, and it was kind of meant for an average-sized guy, so I didn't get to use it, right? And obviously, it was very expensive, and they could only have one prototype. But the point is, if we're not all building the future, it's going to look and feel like it's made for somebody else, and that's something where it really starts in public education.
I heard actually a quote recently, it's learn to code or get coded.
Yeah,
Code or that was a very interesting quote. Yeah. So thank you, Cheryl. So do we have any more questions, or can we move to our third sector?
Let's move on to our third for right now.
Okay. So would you like to...
Before we lift that, I think that's an interesting subject you bring up, Sean, and that's there used to be a division between your private life and your public life. And what the phone has done, the smartphone has done, is really blur that distinction. And now a public life, private life are one and the same. And there's all kinds of security and privacy issues surrounding all of this. There was a show on 60 Minutes was on the other night, and Charlie Rose was talking about all the great things that are happening in medicine. We'll talk about that in a minute with the Watson computer and how it can take you and compare you against people who have the same body makeup and then be able to trim of treatments. But it also talked about something scary, which is that we are really deferring the discussion, the policy discussion about privacy and security to the big companies, the Amazons, the Ciscos, the Microsofts, and they're having these discussions. And frankly, they're telling us, don't worry, it'll be fine. And we saw the other day, the end of the show, they had a human-looking robot. And I don't know if you had seen the show. And a very pretty woman, you think that's but a robot. And Charlie Rose asked, he said, what's your goal in life? And she looked at him and said, to be smarter than you. Yeah. And Ray Kurzweil says that that's not too far in the future, and that's going to happen. So is it responsibility to have discussions like this here and other places that talk about, while it's good, it all seems to be great, but there is a dark side, is there not, to all of this?
So at the end of the day, despite the fact that the digitization of our environments is an inevitability, we are still in control of our destiny. And I think we get to control a lot of that destiny and how we deploy technologies and how we use technologies. And so I don't want to emphasize, or underemphasize the point that humans are still going to play a vital role in the world that we live in the future. And it's important for us to take active roles in that discussion. When I talk with companies, security, privacy are topics they think a lot about, they talk a lot about, they're extremely concerned about. And often, in almost every single case, they view whatever underlying information is gathered and digitized as the proprietary information of the individual. So they're not thinking about that information as their information. They're thinking about it as the information of the individual user. They're trying to empower the environment in that system so that the individual user can take that information and utilize it in other settings. You see that for, one of the areas that has probably been digitized most heavily thus far is around health and fitness and personal activity levels. And you can see today how easy it is for end users and consumers to share that information across different devices, and across different apps, so that they can really get a full picture. I have a bathroom scale that's connected to the internet. I have wearables that I wear. I have apps that I use that monitor how much I'm eating. All of those are speaking to each other. And so the second I step on that scale, it communicates that information to the app that's measuring how much I'm eating. Every time I go for a walk or a run or a bike ride, it takes all of that information and communicates it to the app, that's looking at this broad picture of my active life. And so while those are each individual apps and services and hardware, they're allowing me to control that experience. And so I think what companies are trying to balance is security and privacy, while at the end of the day making the consumer the one who controls that proprietary information and can utilize that proprietary information to empower all of these services.
And become educated in the process.
Yes, definitely.
Exactly.
So we're fortunate today to have Dr. Ruben Verghese, who's our Director of Public Health. Dr. Verghese, we're pleased to have you here today. And you talk a lot about the change that's probably going to disrupt. The one area of the industry that hasn't been disrupted for hundreds of years is the medical profession. And there's a disruption coming. I was down in Colombia, South America, with a group of resident students from Tulane University, doctors who were going in. And I talked a little bit about this, and they had no clue. I said, no, it's the same. We're going through medical school now. It's all going to be the same. But Sean, you point out that there's a change coming.
Definitely. Yeah, we're seeing a massive democratization of healthcare. It's happening slowly, where consumers are increasingly getting access to their proprietary health information, and they're able to make decisions and be better informed than ever before. Take something as simple, I've talked about bathroom scales, take something as simple as your own weight. I mean, this used to be something that we went to a doctor to get. People didn't have bathroom scales 50 years ago, 60 years ago. It was very uncommon to have access to that information on a daily basis or however frequently you wanted to measure it. Now we can step on a scale and we can share that information with a host of individuals if we wanted to. We could have medical professionals look at that. We could have family members look at that. We could post it daily to Facebook if we wanted to. You know, I don't want to share that information with anybody. But so that's just one example of something that has become completely democratized. And no longer is that information that's only available at a hospital or through a doctor. And you're seeing that happen in a number of places. So it isn't just with your weight. The internet has empowered us with information. Now sensors are enabling us to get more exact measurements. I just today reviewed the submissions for CES's Innovation Awards. And what is happening in healthcare is phenomenal. I can't talk about any of those yet, but what is being democratized just in the next 6 months, things that will be released at CES in January of 2017 are phenomenal. Things that we today go and see doctors for will be available in our homes at our leisure in 6 months. It's incredible.
Your thoughts?
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I wanted to go back to the quote that you really started this with, drowning in data but starving for wisdom. I agree that data is important, and I think that the acceleration of the amount of data is tremendous. What healthcare and the clientele will probably need is how to make sense of that data, okay? So I'm all for the data expansion, but the concern that I've had as a healthcare provider is sense making, because it's data, it's not information until we make sense of it. And the internet is full of information, but is it contextualized for the individual? It's not to suggest that doctors are the only people, or nurses, or healthcare providers. However, in our society, we've provided that structure. So we've got to find a way to democratize that sense making. And the problem is, it's not that easy to do, because a lot of diseases and conditions take years to develop. So what do you do to help people have that access? We have human structures in the U.S. that are compared to other countries that practice medicine differently. So those are going to be the challenges, because you've got a number of people who don't understand some of the healthcare tools out there. How do you make sure that they have the right information to make the best decision for them? So some of the examples about if we're going to give people access to customized medications or to x-rays, our structure as a nation has to change, because those rules are at a governmental structural level where, because of past concerns about would people have access to charlatans versus good medical information, how are we going to put those two together? So I think I'm very excited about the increase in data. What I'm hoping is also that there will be a push from the same individuals to actually help with sense making, because I think that's part of it, and goes back to some of the discussions earlier. A lot of this is about relationships and dialogue. We have to talk about what we as a group make sense of the health data and what to do with it, because unfortunately, in my experience, both when I was in clinical practice and now in public health on a population level, behavior change is not as easy to encourage. I mean, I realized how powerful cigarettes were as a behavior when a person who's had a massive heart attack and has had 2 bypass surgeries still won't be able to quit. So what we need to be able to do is take the data and figure out a way to then have the dialogues, and this is where I was going to go, that I think the role of government probably at all levels is to help with some of that dialoguing and sense making as a community. What can we do to know how to make sense of that information and help people make the best decisions for themselves? Because in the end, that I think is what we need to do. And we'll have to tackle the privacy issues, ownership issues, and security issues that health data really it needs to be addressed. Because I think, just like with